Hi there, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Excellent, thanks very much. I mean, as well as I could be doing in this world of turmoil that we're living through.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Absolutely.
Okay. I feel like we can just honestly hop right into this. So, this is so exciting. You are a writer and co-director of For the Living. It's a huge honor to be talking to you. This is so cool for me.
My pleasure
And
as well.
yeah, thank you. And this will be showing at the Omaha Film Festival March 13th, this Thursday at 8:10. Um, so were you were you a head writer or what was your role in like the writing process of this film?
Well, to be honest, the project started without me. Started as a short
Oh.
film. My wife, Lisa Effers, who's the producer, and my co-director, Mark Bennett, who's the co-director, embarked on this project to simply, very much simplified form, to document this ride event itself, Ride for the Living in Poland. Very worthy event. Raised a lot of good money for the Jewish community in Krakow, which is just 60 miles from Auschwitz-Birkenau, the biggest death camp in Europe. Um, and it needs that support, but it is one of the fastest growing Jewish communities uh, in the entire European continent, as I understand it. So they went to document the event because the event itself is a bit odd, riding bikes from a place like Auschwitz across the Polish countryside. Um, but there's a lot of symbolism involved too. So when they came back from scouting some locations in Poland and in the camp itself, they wanted to sit down and talk about what's the real story here because they could have made I don't know, a 20-minute sort of, I don't know, promo for this event,
Yeah.
showed it at every synagogue in North America and Europe, and probably done a lot of good. But they sensed, but couldn't quite put their finger on what the bigger story was. So they sat with me because
Yeah.
that's kind of what I do. And I was been a director for some time myself and a writer as well.
Mhm.
And so the minute we sat at our kitchen table and started talking about the mechanics of this ride, why this route, why this date, I realized that they're retracing the steps of this little 10-year-old boy who was liberated in 1945 and had to
Mhm.
make his way across the Polish countryside in the middle of a raging battle between advancing Russian forces and the retreating Nazi army that was heading back into Germany. Um,
Mhm.
and because he needed to find his family. So you talk about retracing steps, walking a mile or riding 60 miles in someone else's shoes is by definition empathy, a big collective act of empathy. And at that point in time, this was summer of 2019, the words empathy and dehumanization were bubbling up both in politics and culture in the United States.
Mhm.
Uh, I, I don't have any reticence in telling you we had the least empathetic president in the history of the Republic. And dehumanization was part of the language of that campaign and going forward when it came to migrants and people of color and people of different lifestyles. So these two things were already at odds with each other, and they are the opposite extremes of human nature. So I sense there was a bigger story to tell, both within that and beyond the Holocaust, is the, as
Mhm.
you study the brutality of mankind against mankind.
So that wasn't even the original plan, was to have it be this almost like 2 hour long film talking about the overall like the concept of empathy and dehumanization. It was just originally going to be about the bike ride itself.
Yeah, you probably would have gotten a flavor for empathy because of just the nature of the event, and
But not like as in depth.
not as in depth. And
Oh.
the details of the history kind of came from me because I was a history minor and I was a film major, and
Mm,
I follow
exciting.
politics pretty closely. And
Uh-huh.
anybody who does or has any even fleeting knowledge of the last couple of hundred years of history knows that what was going on with the demagoguery and the language, the dehumanization, the genocidal language on
Mhm.
social media is just horrendous. Worse now than it was then.
I was
Uh,
gonna say, still very
anyone
prevalent.
who's anyone who saw 1930s Germany like this. I mean, it was not. didn't take me more than 5 minutes to recognize that during the 2015 campaign leading into 2016. After that, it got even worse and worse and worse. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one who brought the universalization of the
Yeah.
idea. Uh, what is it about all human beings that allows these things to happen? So we had this kind of intersection of human nature and human history. And when those two
Mm-hmm.
things clash, you end up in a place like we are now, where the patterns are just unmistakable. So we don't have, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but we don't have a
No,
great
you're good.
knowledge of history in our country, the United States of America, and we make a point of that in the film, that our education
Mhm.
or people, our education is failing in that regard, and the population's curiosity in that regard is really crumbling.
Mhm.
There's no way to know that these things had happened before. There's no way to know what the warning signs are, the red flashing lights, unless you know that this has happened before. And it's happened, as you saw from the film, over and over and over and over.
It's a cycle and it's still happening.
Well, I like to say this genocide thing, it's more a feature than a bug with humanity now. You know, if you look at the recurrence of genocide throughout the 20th century, when the term was coined right after World War II by Raphael Lemkin, who is a fantastic historical figure. If you haven't read up on him, go Google the guy, go to Wikipedia, go to the Library of Congress. Quite a hero who died young. But he coined this term after witnessing what had happened to the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire previous to World War II. And he was studying this. He was trying to think how can the murder of one person be a greater crime than the murder of a million? Well, the reason is no one has figured out what that crime is when you kill a million people. So just as he was kind of grappling with that, Nazis rolled into his Polish town, killed 59 members of his family, and then this thing called the Holocaust unfolded all around him.
Yeah. It's for being a 19-year-old and as a kid, you learn about the Holocaust and you learn about like, I mean, as vaguely as they taught it to me at least. And you think like, oh, this was atrocious. This is never gonna happen again. Like we're gonna learn as a society. And here, 2025, like there's still stuff going on, which is just absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Yes.
But a question that I had was recently, there was a Joe Rogan podcast that was released on February 28th featuring Elon Musk. And this film works around the idea of empathy. And Elon Musk said in this podcast, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. So I'm just like, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the people in power using their voice and speaking to the masses and saying that empathy is destroying society?
Pretty funny you bring that up. Not funny, but tragically
Mhm.
odd. I'm in the middle of an online debate with somebody about that right now.
Are
Uh,
you?
yeah. And people on the right who seem to think that he's some kind of a folk hero, at least some members of the MAGA sphere, um, look at empathy like it's a weakness. They look at compassion like it's a weakness because they have this social Darwinian attitude. And this goes back to fascism. It's recurrent throughout all fascism and authoritarianism and far right politics, most certainly what's happening in America now. Compromise, compassion, empathy, caring about other people, which all fall under this umbrella of woke, which is that's really all it really means is caring about the welfare and well-being of other humans that may not look or sound or pray or speak like you. So they kind of despise these notions because that chips away at the very foundation of authoritarianism, which is the belief that some human beings are just inherently superior to others. And you got to leave it to us, the oligarchs and the fascist leadership and the strongman leaders. You let us handle stuff. You serfs go out there and work. And they look at people like cattle almost. Speaking of
Mhm.
dehumanization. So when I
Yeah.
saw that, I immediately reacted. This guy, he's kind of put the marker down as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. this is where the war is going to be waged. It's empathy on one side, and it's manifest destiny and Lebensraum, and I'm going to take Greenland and let Putin do whatever he wants on the other side.
It's
Which
just
again, think about how they regard human beings, these guys. I mean, Musk has his own issues with wherever he is on the spectrum, but I'm sorry, that's not an excuse for treating people like furniture or cattle and
I
abusing
agree.
and using a social media megaphone to deride
Yes.
people or immigrants as, with this whole replacement theory nonsense. So cruelty and sadism is a recipe ingredient for
Mhm.
fascism.
Well,
And
it's
the
just
people
like,
that
if you're
follow
different,
fascism,
you're wrong, basically. And
what's that?
it's the whole like the idea of, oh, you're not like me, you're wrong. You're wrong. It's that whole concept. I,
Oh, it goes
it's
beyond
a,
that. It goes beyond you're wrong. It goes, I want to see you punished. And
yeah.
the hit of dopamine that people are getting on the right end of the political spectrum in America right now, they don't care about the price of eggs. They don't care about the price of a gallon of gas. They want to see Trump do mean things to the people that they don't like because they're in sync with him. He hates the same people they hate. So if you've been watching any news coverage or political coverage the last, I don't know how many weeks it's been now. It feels like a year, but I think it's only been like 6 or 8 weeks now. There's
Mhm.
not one positive policy or executive order that's come out of this administration. It's all about punishment, punishment,
Yeah.
punishment, punishment, or letting insurrectionists out of jail. But they love
Yeah.
that. If you listen to the far right and on social media, it's trolling and punishing and death threats and celebration when some transgender person gets refused equal rights, for instance. Less than
Like
1% of our population.
there,
Yeah.
I'm never gonna understand it. I think there's absolutely no good for anyone in doing something like that. And I don't know. It's mind-boggling to me that this is something that we're still like, this is a conversation. Like, I was taught well, and this can even lead back to the whole, like, the whole, like, supposedly woke mindset of having empathy and compassion. It's like, I was taught as a kid to treat people how you want to be treated. And that's how I've lived my life.
Mhm.
Um, and now being so young and seeing the people in power rise up and have these ideas pushing off like the whole mindset of, I mean, and it leads back to the whole like, oh, if you're not like me, you're not strong, you're not in power, then you're wrong, you want to be punished, all of this. And it's been a very hard thing to kind of, I don't know if it come to terms with or like wrap my mind around it, or I don't know. It's scary.
Well, congratulations, first of all, for paying attention because you're doing
Yeah.
more than a lot of people do. They're either tuned out, distracted, or apathetic about it. But
Mhm.
one of the big points that our film makes, and I want everyone to walk away with, is that these are patterns in human history. And we are all susceptible to this mindset, this dehumanizing mindset. I don't care what ethnicity or religion or nationality or age group you are, or sexual preference or whatever, you are
Mhm.
susceptible to this mindset in the right circumstances. And David Livingston Smith makes a very good point that most people now look back on things like slavery and the Holocaust and go, well, if I had been there, I wouldn't have gone along with this.
Yeah, I was gonna
You
say
know,
that.
there's a
Yes.
terrific meme out there. It might have come from a Bill Burr stand-up bit, but it said, if you've ever wondered what you would do during the Holocaust or slavery, you're doing that right now. So if you're tuning out, you're not paying attention, you don't care, you can't take it, you want to look the other way, or you're cheering it on, or anywhere in between, uh, you're very likely of the psychology that you would have been during that time period. And we can all be persuaded in that way. We can all be convinced that this group or that group or those people, they're just not quite us. There's something off about them. There's something missing in the human genome or in their blood or whatever. They're just not quite human. I can't put my finger on it, but the leader keeps saying that they're vermin and they're poisoning the blood of America and they're scum and they're like in the 1930s Germany, they're rats and they're vermin and blah blah. They're cockroaches like in Rwanda and on and on and on. Now you could just say, well, that's just rhetoric. It's just semantics. It's just, free speech. But when you speak like a hammer, then your following all becomes nails. And you just hammer that point over and over and over and over. It gets into your psyche, even me, even you. And we start to think, well, maybe there's something off there, unless we have a defense up against it. And then when something bad begins to happen to those people, they're hauled away, they're put in internment camps, they're sent to Guantanamo, on and on and on. Or they're brutalized when they're pulled over on the side of the road for driving while black, whatever it may be. We've been conditioned to believe, to either shrug, scroll, just, doom scroll elsewhere, or to think to ourselves, well, they did kind of have it coming. So don't ever doubt that anyone you know is susceptible to this impulse.
Well,
Very
and it's so
human,
interesting.
unfortunately, human thing.
Well, like, especially now with social media and that being one of the primary ways that people are kind of getting their information, or I mean, you see pictures and videos from all over the world of stuff like this happening, and it's so easy to just scroll past it and then forget about it. Which so many people do. But I mean, it's literally no different than opening up a textbook, and seeing something about slavery or the Holocaust and seeing pictures of it and being like, this is horrific. I would never let this happen. But you're seeing these pictures on your phone and it's like, you're doing it. You're not doing anything about it as it's happening in real time.
Yeah,
So
and
it's,
one of the points we make about history is the best way to draw empathy through history is to teach about historical events through the prism of individuals. Because we make the point in the film, and I really am imploring anybody in the greater Omaha area, please do see this film because it's about every single one of us and it's about right now in history. Despite what you see relating to the Holocaust, it deals with the Holocaust, but it is not a quote unquote Holocaust movie. And it's not unquote unquote just a genocide movie. It is a movie about human beings and human history and human nature. But when you hear these things and you see these things, we're born with empathy. Small babies have it. They have an aversion to doing harm to others like them, just instinctively and innately. And they don't want to see another person harmed. And they feel something when the baby feels something when another baby is in distress. It's not the sound of a vacuum cleaner or a car passing by. That cry makes them cry as well. So we're born with that. The problem is, I mean, there's a small sliver of humanity that has some brain chemistry issues that doesn't have that innate quality, but that's a bare minimum. But what happens in society and culture and politics and families is that gets ground down, and you quickly begin to hear the dogma of they're not us, kid. They're not like us. There's us and there's them and they're them. I can't put my finger on it, but trust me, they don't deserve the rights you have. They haven't earned it. There's something about them. Look at their skin color. Look at the language they speak. Look at how they worship. No, they don't, they're not real Americans. On and on. The dogma goes on and on and on. So
Mhm.
that gets worn and ground down. So that's why we make the hypothesis in the film of we've got to get back to early childhood education and we've got to fortify that natural innate quality that humans have, not let it get worn down. So that when they
Yeah.
go home, for instance, or when they go to see a violent film, or when they turn on the television and they hear the rhetoric coming from the White House, they don't get swept up in that impulse. They hold on to their humanity. That's
Mhm.
our goal, is the rehumanization of those of us still alive, because we've got plenty of monuments for all the people that have died from genocide and crimes against
Mhm.
humanity and brutality, and we should have tons of education about it, but it's still sort of opaque facts. But if you can
Yeah.
see it through the prism of these other humans, you can empathize, you can put yourself mentally and physically in their place, then you've for lack of you've we've turned off the ability for you to be susceptible to that. It's an inoculation, like an emotional inoculation in Neil deGrasse Tyson's words.
I think, I mean, it's important. It's super, super important. So when going and seeing the film, talking about young people specifically, like especially college students, because I think, and not just college students, people who are old enough to be aware of what's happening, how do you hope that they sort of engage with this film, or what do you hope that they walk away kind of thinking and moving forward?
Okay, well, the kind of stated objective of this film is to start a conversation. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we claim to, I think we can give you a ton of knowledge and you can intellectualize it, but you've got to emotionalize that information as well.
Mhm.
You'll learn, if you're, for instance, a college freshman or a sophomore, you will learn a ton about history in this film. And it's objective, fact-based history. It's not whitewashed. It's not spun in a way to you know, get your blood boiling. It's what I call "don't look away" history. There's a lot of that in human history, and this is not just about North America or United States of America. We pop around the globe and we pop around the centuries to show you it's a pattern in human behavior. So
Yeah,
what I ask people to do, we have Q&As all the time, and I'm confident we're going to have one in Omaha as well.
you will. I
Ask, what
think
is
you
the
will.
call to action of your film? What is the call? What should we do with the emotion and the information you provided us? Number one, I hold on to, this is probably older than a college crowd, is like fiercely, ferociously defend public education and fact-based history. Because there is a really robust movement to whitewash history right now, to get
Mhm.
rid of anything that makes white people feel bad or
Yep.
other, dominant groups. We don't want to offend anybody. We want to make anybody feel bad. There's another great meme I saw the other day is like those who, don't remember history are doomed to repeat it. Those who try to get rid of history are trying to repeat it. And that's
Mhm.
the insidious part of this whitewashing of education.
That's so true.
Oh, it absolutely. We don't, I mean, this anti-DEI thing that's going on right now, it's a white supremacy move, if ever there.
I, yeah, yeah.
So,
It,
we, we've had
mhm.
a pretty good run the last 34 years of advancing uh, some forms of equity, never fast enough for everybody, um, and inclusiveness and anti-discrimination laws and so forth. And they just think that stuff is, for some reason, they think it's poison. And the
Yeah.
reason why is they've got this superiority complex going on, where there's some people that just don't deserve what I have or what you have. And so, as a college student, if you're sitting in this film, there's not going to be a quiz afterwards. There's no test. You don't have to memorize all these historical points, but do recognize the pattern
Yeah.
between Cambodia, Rwanda, and Armenia, and Poland and Germany and Russia during World War II, and Darfur and Ukraine. And a lot of the stuff you're seeing happening at this very, very moment. We had to end the film at a certain point. We couldn't keep going and going and going. Already at an hour and 56 minutes.
Hmm.
A lot of the turmoil you see going on internationally right now, we don't call it out specifically, but it's in there. If you
Hmm.
recognize the proclivities and the patterns and the susceptibilities of human behavior, you'll recognize it in what's going on in the Middle East. You'll recognize it in what's going on in Europe and potentially soon in China and in Africa.
Well, and like when watching this, I thought I was a pretty educated person. And I watched the film, and there was so much that I was just never taught. I like watching it. It was a hard watch. It was such a good film, and it was put together so well. But it was so hard to just like sit down and just. There were obviously there were happy moments of the film, but just the thought of like breaking down and laying out right in front of you all of these different cases where dehumanization has been a thing um that I didn't even know about. And I don't know, it was
Well,
just
early in your college years, so give it a
mhm.
chance. You'll absorb more. But
Yeah, but I thought I knew so much already, and I did not.
well, you've already taken the first step, and that is you actually give a shit.
Yeah, I do give a shit. I give lots of
Okay.
shits.
Well,
It
good,
was
good.
just,
You have plenty of shits left to give. Yeah. No, but I think that's step one. I mean, when you watch
yeah.
these, remember the little blurb that was on the Texas Tech campus where the girl was going around and asking kids what they knew about the Civil War, who won the Civil War.
Hmm.
They were like, "What? You mean the one in 1965? Who was even in it? Who was even in it?"
Hmm.
And a couple of them are African American people. It's because
Yeah.
they don't embrace it. They think history is some sort of, overwhelming onslaught of information when in reality, it that's another thing. In reality, history is just teaches you why the world is the way it is right now. If you have
Yeah.
any curiosity or you're flabbergasted, you're annoyed, you're pissed off, you can't believe it, just study some history. Study as much as you can, because then you start to understand how the tectonic plates moved around and societies grew and exploded and then collapsed and I just had a big conversation with someone online about the early 1950s, which is probably something you haven't learned yet, is this thing called McCarthyism, the big red scare. Biggest demagogue in United States history, second to Trump. If you got in a time machine and you went back to like 1951, 1952, you would think there was a communist around every corner. That the entire government, not a deep state at that point, was infiltrated by communist subversive people. They were trying to hollow out the government and turn us all into a big communist commune. Wasn't true, wasn't true at all. But there was one US senator who had a committee and was hauling people in front of the committee and accusing he was just making stuff up most of the time.
Hmm.
He was calling people communists and he was ruining people's lives because back in those days, it was just after World War II and we had the Red Scare and the Soviet Union was our biggest adversary and they had nuclear weapons. We had nuclear weapons. But telling people that there's a communist under every desk and around every corner is a way to freak people out. Just like
Yeah.
telling people that they're emptying asylums and prisons over our border and they're coming to slit your mother's throat and eat your dog. That same formula,
Yeah.
and people
Wow. Yeah.
will buy it. And the old saying, a lie makes it 5 times around the world before the truth even gets its shoes on, is absolutely true in the world of social media. You see
Mhm.
some of the nonsense said at the State of the Union, that stuff's been repeated all over the world already. Didn't even have a chance to refute it or fact check it. Boom, it catches fire. So demagoguery is the thing that's not uniquely American, but it's uniquely human. And that is, scapegoating certain groups, making you fear or feel rage towards people that don't look, sound, or communicate the way you do or pray the way you do. That stuff's
Mhm.
very, very common. And anyone at the college age, if you happen to turn on any social media, even TikTok, there's a smattering of news bouncing around in there, and you hear something that just makes your hair stand on end, stop and think for a second. What's this guy trying to get me to do by telling me this stuff or feeding me this outrageous lie about, like I said, Haitians eating dogs and cats, which is one of the most ridiculous things ever. But you went out and took a poll during that time period in the fall, there was a big swath of people that bought into that.
Yes, I've talked to people who bought into this.
Yeah,
And like it's the intention is like there's no other goal into other than like instilling fear in people and like pinning everyone against the so-called wrong people because I don't know. It's
you're right.
there's so much I could say. And like even when I try and talk about it, all of my thoughts like they get so jumbled up because it's like it's hard for me to believe that this is a thing now. And especially like being on social media and the president or whoever and the ability to tweet something and send it off to millions of people and they believe it and they take it and they run with it and they pass it on. And then like things will get twisted and then stories will get changed and then people believe that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
One
hard.
thing that will sort of help organize your mind as you go through, hearing the nonsense is
Mhm.
that think about it, kind of zoom out to like 30,000 feet above sea level and remember, this is a human phenomenon. All of this is a human-wide phenomenon. You're susceptible, I'm susceptible. I'm sure at points in my life I've had prejudices or uh, preconceived notions about certain people or certain kinds of people or certain groups of people because of the stuff I'd heard in different places or just a feeling that I got from it. So
Mhm.
these are the things we have to be really on the watch out for. We need to bolster that empathy, push down the dehumanizing impulse. You know, I get in arguments with a lot of people, and the most common parlance for name calling on social media is piece of shit, right?
Mhm.
Think about that. I mean, think about it's not just words. You're really relegating somebody to not only subhuman, but just the most disgusting,
Mhm.
vile, repugnant form of inanimate object. Now, does anyone walk around and intellectualize that and go like, yeah, he thinks sexual dirt? No, but what they do is they think they're not worthy of respect. They're not worthy of rights. They're not worthy of kindness. They're not worthy of protection from the law. All of these things. So it can get really, really bad. And like we point out in the film, there was the head of the ADL pointed out that during a certain period during Trump's first administration, I'm going to move rooms really quick.
No, you're
Um,
good.
uh, there was 17 something thousand tweets proclaiming Hitler was right for slaughtering Jews. And there were people wearing shirts on
Mhm.
January 6th,
It'll
2020.
happen today.
It said Camp Auschwitz and 6 million wasn't enough. So
Mhm.
there's enough minds out there that are going to take this stuff in and just close.
Well, yeah, and like even I'm assuming you know all the Kanye West stuff that's been happening.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, like him and the power that he has and his fan base, who I'm assuming are probably pretty young, like it's becoming a normalized thing to have this type of belief, and even just like anti-Semitism is becoming a thing again. And I mean, I know that it's never gone away completely. Of course, there are people around who have their own beliefs, but it's becoming a widespread idea again, where you hear people talking about it. You see people showing off that belief, which I don't, I don't know. It's
Well, you know what happens in that too? I mean, that is a centuries old phenomenon, really. They call it the world's oldest hatred. And the most common scapegoat in human history is Jewish people. But what you see now with social media amplifying it is that people that had no opinion about it just start noticing, it seems like everybody hates Jews. There must be something
Mhm.
to it. Oh, no, maybe I don't,
They believe
like
that
a
100%.
sheep groupthink kind of thing that people first they excuse it, then they start going, well, they must all know something that I don't know. It really can happen that way. Same thing with the demagoguery about migrants right now, too.
Mhm.
Really disgusting. But
It's people
I,
not being able to make their own opinion.
my call to action is just to guard, be mindful of this stuff, guard against it. Um, don't be infected by it. Uh, I'm there's no I have no objective or self-serving motivation in telling people to reject dehumanization. I'm not going to make money off it. I'm not going to become famous for it. I'm not going to our film is not going to make a gajillion dollars. It's really about, let's kind of get our humanity back. And that's what,
Hmm.
that's the other one of the other sort of not calls to action, but kind of a tagline for the film is, when are we going to spend some of the energy and the time that we put into building monuments for dead people that are completely justified and put some of that time and energy into rehumanizing of us, those of us who are still here? Let's rehumanize the human beings that are still here so we avoid the next big atrocity.
Hmm. After making the film and focusing on all of the bad in society, how do you remind yourself of the good?
Well, you know, even the worst of us, well, most of the worst of us still love their families, you know? I mean, there was the old saying, Hitler loved his dog. I don't know if that's true, but it's a cliche. Um,
Yeah.
our capacity for good and compassion and cooperation is nearly infinite. We just don't tap into it as much as we should. And that whole Martin Luther King Jr. quote of, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. There's a lot of us who cling to that. I cling to that, thinking like,
Mhm.
not only comeuppance and karma, but the 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 entirety of humanity. There's more, and I don't want to get into us and them thing, but there are more of us than there are of them. There's more
Mhm.
people with compassion and caring and empathy and common a sense of common humanity than there are those who want to do us harm. Problem is, they think we're weak.
Mhm.
In reality, it takes a lot of strength to reach across these uh, artificial lines in in society based on ethnicity and religion and everything else.
Yeah.
Takes guts to do that. Takes guts. You have to take a little bit of a chance. You have to take the time to look human beings in the eyes too.
Mhm.
One of our great professors in the film talks about you can't deny somebody's humanity if you just spend a few minutes talking to them and looking into their eyes as they speak, no matter
Yes. I
matter what
mean, yeah.
nonsense coming out of their mouth is. But when you send them 1,000 miles away and you come up with a epithet for them, or you listen to some demagogue talk about them, or you talk about them as a group rather than as, you know,
Individuals. Mhm.
100,000 individuals, we've got to teach history about individuals, whether it's Anne Frank or Harriet Tubman or um, George Floyd or uh, any of the people that helped build this country across the spectrum of different, nationalities and migrations. We've got to
Mhm.
tell these stories as individuals, and that's what some great films do as well. They really put you in the sort of in the skin of people that lived long before us.
Mhm.
You
That's what
really,
you did in this film. There was like the different snippets where you would talk about different events and you would use the word you
yes,
when going through these. That was a very, very, very clever way of kind of bringing the audience into the film and that type of event, which I thought was super smart. Super, super, super smart.
thanks. It's very gratifying that worked with you. We've had that same
Yes.
comment in a lot of our conversations and Q&As afterwards. It's called a second person narration. Um,
Mhm.
and the interesting thing about that is typically USC Shoah Foundation is a website I would advise anyone to visit because it has this massive library of genocide survivor testimonies where, they would send people over to their house with a, really raw little camera, and they would just ask them questions and they would tell stories about their time in Germany or in Armenia or Rwanda or Cambodia or in Bosnia when the Serbians came in. And that's always been sort of the gold standard of teaching humanistically about genocide. Testimony. You got to sit and listen to a person that's been through it. Well, the problem with that, there's no problem with it generally. Problem with it in a feature film, if you're going to have, you're going to try and fit a lot of a lot of atrocities in there, is you can't insist those people talk faster. They're going to tell the story in their own way, in their own human way.
Yeah.
You can't rush them, and you can't compress them and edit them and all that. So, uh, the sort of the second best way to do that is to do second person narration. Place you in
Mhm.
the body of a 10-year-old boy in Rwanda, or
Yes.
22-year-old woman in the Ottoman Empire. I'm glad to hear that you found it effective.
Well, it definitely was. And along with that, like you had the voiceover like guiding people through it, and then the visuals that you had along with that, like visually showing what was happening. I think they interacted with each other in a very, what's the word? It worked. What you were trying to do worked. For
Well,
sure.
I'll take that. That's a 4 stars right there. Um,
There you go. Um,
yeah,
uh,
if any students that study psychology or philosophy are listening, especially psychology, think about, people throw the word empathy around a lot. It's become empathy has become almost like a catch-all term for people just thinks it means being kind. And in reality, it's much more technical than that, as Franz de Waal outlines, where you have the cognitive version of it, where I have to sit and I have to think about what it's like to be in your place. I have to imagine it. And then you have the more emotional part of it, where he calls it the body part, where I see the turmoil or trauma or pain that you're going through, or laughter or happiness, whatever it may be, and it just kind of leaves you and washes over me. Those are two different kinds of empathy, but they're both very important. The cognitive part, you got to use a lot of imagination because again, you may have to imagine people 8,000 miles away from you,
Mhm.
who living in a village in Ukraine that's being just saturated, bombed every day. uh,
Mhm.
they can't send you pictures, or maybe they can send you scant pictures from a drone shot, but you have to imagine there's human beings in that building, children and old ladies and, you know, guys trying to get up and put out the fire and then go put on the uniform and go fight, to defend their homeland. So there's all that kind of stuff, but there's a chunk of me and you and them, and there's a little bit of all of us and everybody.
Mhm.
That's the kind of thing you just have to sort of it's almost like a mantra. You have to keep reminding yourself.
Did working on this movie have an impact on you as like a human being? Did you learn anything? Or like it had to be a very long process filming. I'm assuming did COVID have an impact?
Yeah, two questions there. We started in
I know
2019,
that was two
and
questions.
then we it's okay, I can cover them both. We had to take maybe a year and a half break during COVID.
Mhm.
2020, and we weren't able to interview anybody because the protocols were just too strict. I've been a director for a while, and the COVID protocols on shoots on sets were very, very strict, and they made your budget blow up by 300% because you had to have everyone in a different room. Yeah, you don't even want to get
Mhm.
into the sausage making of that. But so we had a pretty big break. It did help some of us kind of get back and pay attention to what was happening in current events and rethink structure a little bit. The structure, in my mind, was pretty close to being what it is now back in late 2019. But you talk about a personal impact. The thing
Mhm.
that most impacted me was the research. We have 930 different archival clips and photographs in this film, which is pretty massive. It's kind of like
Mhm.
what Ken Burns would put in like 6 hours, you know? Um,
Mhm.
and so searching, researching, and curating all that and deciding what's proper and what's not, I took on most of that role. Um, and my wife, the producer, obviously was a very heavy hand in that because that's what producers do. And then we had an archivist as well. They would go out and search for the rights or whether it's fair use or public domain or what have you. And then
Mhm.
they'd go, well, this rights holder of this particular photograph says no way in hell you can use this because it goes against his or her politics, or it's a family treasure or whatever. Then we have to go back and find something of similar content. But the net emotional effect on me was some dark, dark stuff. And
Yeah.
you need to do a Google search or a Getty search with very precise language, like, Rwandan boy next to pit of dead Tutsis, right? It gets even more graphic than that, I'm sorry to tell you. And and then, spending 6 to 8 hours a day doing that for weeks and weeks and months at a time, um, has an emotional toll on you where there's like kind of this black cloud hanging over your head. So you just got to, some days you just got to shut the computer and go have a beer.
I
Um,
bet,
and,
yeah.
and, and, and do it like a cerebral palate cleanse too, and just kind of like, go watch an episode of Friends or something. And
Seriously, turn on a sitcom. Like some
but
happy vibes.
the other
Yeah.
byproduct that obviously is, when you put that kind of language in a Google search, sooner or later, some Department of Homeland Security is
I thought that.
probably
I
paying
was,
attention.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm probably on a couple of lists out there.
I believe it.
But at least we have a finished product to say, look, this is what we were working on. But
There you go.
it
Yeah.
did have an emotional impact on me, and sometimes it bubbles back up um,
Mhm.
uh, in dreams. And then when we do screen this for audiences, I do pay very close attention to the sort of the energy level of the audience during some of the darker bits. Always asking myself, did we go too far? Is it too much? And I think I'm at a point now where we've shown it enough times and we've had enough really, really positive outpouring afterwards that I think we hit the right note with that, thankfully.
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
we screened for a 7th and 8th grade classes a few weeks
Really?
ago.
How was
A few weeks
that?
ago in Boulder. Great. It was actually we have a 13-year-old daughter, and it was one of her former groups of classmates, and the faculty, we let them screen it ahead of time to make sure that they were comfortable, and I think they got parental permission, but a lot of engagement, a lot of
Yeah.
just tons of questions, you know, and obviously they didn't know about all these things, but I think they were doing a lot of Holocaust sections of history.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
they
seventh and eighth
had a
grade. Yeah.
general sense of a lot of people died. And
Hmm.
then to learn that so many perpetrators existed over so many centuries of time, and
Yeah.
that kind of thinking and impulse is still lurking out there in society is kind of a sobering thought for these kids.
Me too. Like, yeah. Um,
But
did
I
you
would
have
never go any younger than that. I think probably 13, 14,
no?
I'd go.
Yeah. What was the like fact checking process like? Because there was a lot of information in the film.
Mm. And I don't expect everybody to remember every bit of it. Again, recognize the patterns. That's the important part.
Hmm.
Um,
Did you have to fact check like
Yeah,
everything?
well, all the academics we have, Michael Berenbaum, David Livingston Smith, Timothy Snyder, who is very, very well celebrated now as a proponent for Ukraine. And that guy knows more about European history than anyone. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, the
Yeah.
list goes on and on and on. Stephen Smith of USC Shoah.
A
Uh,
lot of people.
they were
Lot.
sort of in the moment fact checkers. And then when it came to the history of African American slavery and indigenous people in North America, um, there were a couple of college professors that I had was communicating with online, and I would send them the narration and
Mm.
describe sort of the scenes that were associated with it and the claims that were associated with, because sometimes I took linguistic liberties, not factual liberties, but in the way that I described it.
Hmm.
For instance, saying that, the federal prison system just became the blackest neighborhood in America. Um,
Hmm.
that's factual, but it's also a more creative turn of phrase than.
Yeah, I think in saying it in that way, you can it'll click in a different way to people hearing it. And it's less formal, I would say. It's like,
Conversation.
you're being straight up with it. Yeah.
Well, it's another way, again, to draw someone into caring, you know.
Hmm.
Information, it's not just a wall of factoids thrown at me. It's information that is about
It's
human
real,
beings. Yeah, yeah.
very real. Um, is there anything that you wish that you would have done differently in the film now that it's complete?
Mm, oh, well, and every director will tell you this, that you watch it and there are little tweaky things that you go like,
Yeah.
we should have shaved 5 frames off of that, or um, had that fade up a second sooner, things like
The
that.
little stuff.
Well, I would have loved to have gotten more licensed music. I think we kind of had a
Oh.
run with the music we licensed from Talking Heads and Bruce Springsteen, but um, uh, there's all kinds of songs with meanings and subtext that could really add a bunch. But I'm really, really happy with the musical score that Daniel Lachey did for us with the Scottish orchestra. So that's, yeah, don't have a lot of regrets. There's an old saying with film, at some point you've got to put the pencils down and let your baby go. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah,
tweak forever.
I'm
But
sure.
one of the things that I did notice, and I talk about this a lot, is as we knew there was a lot of topical implications in the film. Yes, it deals
Mhm.
with a lot of history, but if you really are paying attention, it's about right now. It's about, I mean, not just right now. It's about next week and last week. It's about the environment in the United States of America at this very moment. And if you find that perplexing and maddening, uh, this film will help you grapple with that to some degree. It
Mhm.
doesn't give you all the answers, but it'll help you grapple with it. But we knew current events uh, played a role. And there were points in time when we were clearing all the imagery and doing all the final touches and composing and recording the score, which takes a big beast of amount of time, that current
Yeah.
events were sort of like racing past us. So I sort of equate it to, imagine you're driving down the freeway in your car and you're doing 65 miles an hour, and current events is doing 68.5 you know, or 75 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, whoa. You know, got to get that
Yeah.
in here. You know, so the
That would
one,
be so interesting just trying to kind of like keep up with everything
most
because it's never
documentaries
going to
don't have that
stop.
problem. Yeah, very few documentaries have that problem because they're about a past
Hmm.
event that's a moment in time, and ours is as well. But the implications are very much about right now. So,
Yes.
um, so we just had to like become comfortable with the idea that we can't we can't be like breaking news. You know, it's different.
Hmm.
Breaking news is different than a documentary. Now, a year
Yeah.
from now, I don't know how it's going to feel. I think it still covers a moment, time, and a phenomenon in human patterns that will
Yeah.
still be true and relevant a year or 2 years from now. But
100%.
um, the current events thing always does concern me. The refrain between our team, between Mark and Lisa and I, we would constantly say like, "Did you see what happened in the news today? We've got to be out right now. This is our movie right now." And that
Yeah.
sounds a little self-serving, but it really is just like,
No.
we have something to say about this.
Yes. I'm sure you have a lot to say about so much.
Well,
You probably
clearly I
like,
have
well, and I feel like
already.
from for how involved you sound with politics, I'm sure recently, and it's not going to stop. Do you not get overwhelmed with everything and like knowing everything that you know and just kind of having to sit back and just be like, oh boy, you can kind of sense you've seen this before. You've probably analyzed the patterns previously in history and you can kind of apply it to now and just be like, oh, here we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
The overwhelming thing, it's some of the same stuff other people are feeling, that the cruelty and the sadism is being dished out so fast and with so much vigor, for lack of a better word, so
Mhm.
much determination to just punish and own the libs and all this other kind of nonsense. It's coming at such a fast and furious pace. They call it like a digital blitzkrieg, really is what's happening. And that's what the original blitzkrieg was. And, at the beginning of World War II, before the United States ever got in, is this, it's German for lightning war. And it's the shock and awe was the same thing. And they even use that terminology from Iraq. Um, the idea that just to paralyze and pulverize the population before they have a chance to even kind of like shake their heads and make sense of it all and then push back.
Mhm.
That's the part that I find overwhelming. And then I get overwhelmed when I see that uh, our government and our leaders are overwhelmed, are just kind of flustered and don't know what to say. The one thing that frustrates me the very most is I don't understand in the world of journalism why they can't call a lie a lie.
Yeah.
They
They always
call it
like
a
kind of,
misstatement of facts or a debunked
yep,
theory
yep.
or a factual misquote. It's just like
the soft pedaling of these words, you've got to talk like people talk. And when somebody lies,
Yes.
you need to call it a lie. Now, I understand that the lawyers at the networks will be counseling all journalists to look, we can't get sued. You got to prove intent when you say lie. Some of them are so obviously the intent is there that you just got to call a lie because otherwise people are like, wait, what? Misstatement of what? A debunked woo, huh? Or like
Yeah.
I always say, he said without evidence. Oh my God. That's what you say when you're a defense lawyer and you're and your client is guilty.
Right? Yeah.
You do
Well,
that?
like so I'm majoring in journalism, and my opinion, or I don't know, I feel like as a journalist, you have the responsibility to be completely honest and transparent with people about what is happening,
Mhm.
which you don't really see very often nowadays. So it's a little it's not a little, it's definitely disconcerting. But I feel like, yeah, as long as you're aware and
Well, journalism is a business and they do have to make money. It didn't used to be that way in the 1970s. It wasn't that way. It was the late 70s, early 80s. They turned it into entertainment. Um,
Mhm.
if you're interested in journalism, I highly advise you watch Rachel Maddow every night on
Rachel Maddow.
MSNBC. She is brilliant. She makes it conversational, but she will
Mhm.
weave in the first 10 minutes is something in history, and she shows you how that history relates to exactly what's going on now. In other words, patterns. And not your first rodeo kind of thing.
Yep.
But always taking us, having a link to something, weaving it into a narrative that connects it with history, makes you
Mhm.
realize that this is an old trick. Humans
Yeah, I'll
try
check
just
that out for
do it.
sure.
Yeah, she's 5 nights a week uh, for the first 100 days, but it's some of it's commentary. It's not strictly journalism, but she is telling the truth. She
Yeah.
hinges it with the commentary because if something's ridiculous, she'll call it ridiculous. So
See, that's what I like to hear. I don't know how Zoom works. I'm nervous that it's just going to instantly end the call at 5 o'clock. I have one last question that I want to ask, just because you're talking to like
yeah,
college students and you're a filmmaker. What advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers and writers, especially those working on independent films?
I would give you the same advice that was given to me when I was in college and I was a film student. If you're a writer, keep writing. I know that sounds dopey and oversimplified. You got to keep writing. You got to keep that muscle strong, even if it's something that's no one's ever going to see. Keep working at it. Keep working that muscle. Keep developing your voice. Read what you write out loud, writers, in a room by yourself. Read it out loud. That's the only way you'll really know how it's going to come off, whether it's dialogue or fiction or journalism or anything else. Read it out loud. Then you'll realize where you've made mistakes and used one word too many times. Filmmakers, uh, make sure you have something to say. There was a big interview with a legendary rock star, and they said, "Why didn't you put out an album for 5 years?" He goes, "Because I didn't have anything to say." If you don't have anything to say, then don't try to make art.
I mean,
Wait
yeah,
till you have
like
something
it's
to,
completely
that-
true.
yeah, but develop that voice and that point of view on the world and that thing you want to say to the world, and then start making something with it.
And use it as an outlet. I
Yes.
think it's a creative way to go about things for sure. Yeah.
Empathy too. Empathy in art is so key.
It's
You got to try to
empathy
imagine how
always.
you digest what you made, you know?
Empathy always with everything, I think is so, 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 so important. That's just how I was raised, though. Like the fact that it's a conversation is something that I would have never really expected because that's just how I was taught, like, be a good human being, treat people how you want to be treated. And that was literally it. So
Well, that's
I
supposed to
think
be one of the pillars of Christianity, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, well, I think you took a very challenging concept and you showcased it in a way that was like truly engaging and educational. I learned so much from watching it. So
Then
you
you
should
need
be
to
very
watch it
proud of
again.
yourself.
Come again, bring your friends.
Yeah, I
Anybody in your
will.
journalism class, especially our history classes or political science
Mhm.
classes. But
I'm telling the radio people. Yep.
I
March
implore
13th.
Yes. I don't know how to pronounce the name of that theater, but
Exarban.
Exarban. Oh,
Exarban, Nebraska
it
spelled
came from
back.
Harry Potter. Yeah.
I know, right?
Axabad. Folks,
Yeah, so
come out. We won't quiz you, but your head will be overflowing with information,
yep,
and you'll be up to
100%.
the gills in emotion.
Yeah.
It's a crash course on humanity.
Mhm. I think it's something that everyone should watch at least once in their life, personally. I think it's super important.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, I think you did good. I'm super excited to check it out, and you'll do your little Q&A, which will be fun. Yep, Exarban Cinema, March 13th at 8:10 p.m. It should be a good time.
Those
Yeah.
Q&A is always very lively. They're
Oh,
quite
I'm ready. I'm ready with my questions. Like it'll be
Bring it.
good.
Bring
Excited.
it. All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks again for taking the time to actually talk to me. This is a fantastic conversation.
Yay. Okay, well, I'm ready again.
All right, sounds good. Have a good one.